In this episode, I'm outside. Big fucking deal. But today we're talking about abs. Oh yeah, and some core.
The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, the bacon is sizzling. Welcome to the Daily Swole.
Welcome everyone to episode 266 of the Daily Mother. Come on now. Swole! When I flex, you flex, we all flex our biceps, the most muscular podcast in the realm. And the bearded genius, the bearded one. The one with the beard, the one with the facial hair, the one with the long hair, the one that looks like a gorilla with way too much testosterone is here. Papa Swolenormous is here, and this is episode 266. For those of you that might be joining me for the first time, this is the 266th consecutive Daily Swole. They're all consecutive, every single day at 12 noon Eastern time. So thank you so much for joining me live on Facebook at Swolenormous. Thanks for watching every single episode on YouTube and listening in on the podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes. So you can catch the Swolecast. You can catch the Daily Swole any way you like it. You can watch it on YouTube, which I have over 700 videos, exercise videos, full workout videos, youtube.com/Swolenormous. And of course, you can watch all the replays on Facebook. You can catch the live Q&As, so turn live notifications on. And you can listen to every episode on SoundCloud and iTunes. So there's so much stuff going on. And let's rein that bad boy back in. Let's bring it back to the basics. Let's talk about the core. So you have a term that is thrown around like water. People throw the term around core. I want to work my core. I want to strengthen my core. Well, most people don't have the foggiest fucking clue what the core is. The core is the center of your body. You have the axial and you have the appendicular skeleton. You have the hips all the way to the cervical spine. That's your core. And then you have your appendicular skeleton, which is your arms and your legs. The core is from the pelvis to the cervical spine. Most of you probably think, oh, I want to work my core. You mean you want to work your six-pack. You mean you want to work your rectus abdominis. We're not talking about the rectus abdominis. When I say core, we're talking about the entire centricity of the body. We're talking about literally the core. We're talking about the pelvis, the intrinsic core stabilizers, the pelvic floor stabilizer. We're talking about the longissimus, these muscles, the multifidus, the muscles that are along the base of the spine, the ones that are deep. These are the ones that you hurt when you're in a car accident, when you injure your back, the ones that are deep. You don't hurt your lat. You hurt these muscles, these spinal erectors, these ones that are deep inside the body, the ones that you cannot see. You usually look at the superficial muscles because they're closer to the surface. We're talking about the deep muscles of the back end of the core. We're talking about the transverse abdominis, the muscle that's most responsible for preventing lower back injury. We're even talking about the glutes. We're talking about the base of the pyramid. We're talking about the major hip stabilizer and the center, one of the most important muscles in the entire body. And we're also talking about the muscles all along the thoracic and the cervical spine and the ones that stabilize the shoulder girdle and so forth. So you have many muscles that interact together to create what's known as the core, the center. Fine. You have muscles that are made up of type 2 and type 1 fibers primarily, and also a mix throughout the entire body. The muscles that you want to train for your core, when you say you want to train your core, you're talking about those type 1 fibers, you're talking about your diaphragm, you're talking about your transverse abdominis, also known as the TVA. This is one of the most important muscles in the body, and the one that we're really going to talk about a lot today, the transverse abdominis. The TVA is a natural belt in the body. If you see people wearing a weightlifting belt, the transverse abdominis is pretty much the same thing but deep inside the body. It attaches to the base of the spine, to the pelvis, and it surrounds the organs and provides a support. When you suck your stomach in and you try to make your waist as tiny as possible by drawing in the navel to the spine, that's when you're activating your transverse abdominis. Now, this muscle is what's going to improve your core stability. It's going to improve your posture and help neutralize your lower back and neutralize your lordotic curve. And it's going to provide that cement around the basketball pole. So I use this example a lot. If you were to drive any pole, but let's say a basketball hoop, and you're going to dig a big hole in the ground, and you put a basketball hoop in, and then you fill it with sand around it, it's probably going to fall over on its own, or after the first couple shots, it's going to start tilting. But if you put cement and you secure it, it's going to be a lot more sturdy and be a lot more stable. And a tight core and a strong core are muscles that provide that integrity, that provide that that cinching effect around the organs and that pressure around the base of the spine. The issue comes into play when these muscles are weak, when you're sitting down a lot, when you don't activate your core musculature, when you don't do stabilization exercise, when your glutes are very weak, your hips become less stable, your lower back becomes less stable, and it shuts down these core stabilizers. When the core stabilizers shut down, then voila, you're at risk for drastic injury, herniated discs, bulging discs, you're even at risk for shoulder injuries and neck pain. Now, when you think about the pyramid, it's wider at the bottom, which in our way of thinking, we're going to be talking about not necessarily wider, not that you want that big badonka-donk, but that you want a strong core. So wider pyramid, stronger core. The glutes help neutralize the hips, which is going to put the spine in a proper position at the base, the lumbar spine. You still need that integrity. You still need that core integrity. So we talked about the transverse abdominis. Let's talk about the rectus abdominis, the six-pack. Most of you want to see your abs. You say, okay, Papa Swole, Swolenormous, I'm working my transverse abdominis, but I want to see my abs. I want that six-pack. The muscle you're talking about when you're discussing your six-pack, you are referring to the rectus abdominis. And absolutely, Dominic, live on Facebook, just so you know, if you're not watching live, you got to jump in because these comments are fantastic. Knee pain as well. Before I even get into that, because that's almost going off a completely different direction, but I've talked to this extent many times. When your core is weak, when the base of your core, when your hips are weak, it creates instability above and below. So distal in both directions. If you have a weak core, if you have a weak base, if you have weak glutes, your hips are less stable, it puts your lower back at risk, and it puts your knees and even your foot and ankle complex at risk. Of course, from the ground up works as well. If you have any knee or ankle issues, it can affect your hips. But if you have any kind of core instability, especially at the base, especially at the glute region, you're going to put your knees at risk. So that's another excellent point, and that's something you should always be aware of. And we've touched upon that in different episodes. Perfect time for a garbage truck. So if you hear a lot of noise, they're trying to steal the excess gains I have lying around here. So let's go back to the rectus abdominis, the six-pack. That is a muscle. That's more of a global movement muscle. If you are working your transverse abdominis, you're not going to work this TVA by sucking your stomach. You're not going to work your transverse abdominis and get jacked. You're not going to see this muscle. It's not going to look shredded. You're not going to see it at all because it's deep. It's deep, deep, deep inside the spine. It's deep at the base of the spine. The six-pack, the rectus abdominis, you will see. The rectus abdominis, you will see, and what you're going to notice is that everyone's different, but you're going to see that split and that fascial connection, that fascial tissue that's interspersed between the muscle bellies of the rectus abdominis. Now, this muscle is a movement muscle. It provides flexion for the spine. It provides flexion for the spine, which is why people mostly do sit-ups. They do a lot of crunches. They do a lot of these spinal flexion movements. Now, the issue with a lot of these exercises, and this is where this whole conversation is going to lead towards, the issue with a lot of these exercises is that they don't hit the rectus abdominis. They're working mostly the hip flexors. They're working mostly the movements that provide excessive hip flexion around the pelvis. If you want to isolate the rectus abdominis, you only have to bend a few degrees, maybe 10, 15 degrees. You only have to bend slightly. Stand up nice and straight, and then try to touch your rib cage down to your pelvis. You can only crunch a little bit. This is why you don't have to lift your lower back off the ground. This is why full sit-ups often hurt people's backs, because you have poor hip stability, you have poor lower back and poor core strength. And by doing these full, large movements, doing full sit-ups, knees all the way to your elbows all the way up to your knees, and doing full-blown sit-ups, a lot of times that causes people back pain, and you don't get the results that you want. Pretty much you're doing a hip flexion movement with a lot of isometric hold, which is why you might feel it a little bit in your abs, but you don't get the results that you want. So when it comes to getting abs, and developing your abs, you need a couple things. You want a flat stomach, right? You want a washboard stomach. You want washboard abs. Well, washboard abs means flat. you're not going to get flat abs by doing crunches. You can do crunches till you pass out. You're not going to get that flat effect. What you want to do is a drawing in maneuver. And someone else said vacuums, and that's a classic Arnold. That's a classic bodybuilding move, vacuums, but it's also commonly done in yoga, drawing the belly button into the spine. So you could all do this right now, and I encourage you to try it with me just to see what muscle I'm talking about. This is the transverse abdominis. So everyone sit up nice and tall, wherever you are. You can do this standing up. You can do this lying down. You can do this any way you want. So sit up nice and tall, and I want you to suck your stomach in, trying to touch your belly button to your spine, like you're putting on the tightest pair of jeans in the world. Not guilty. You are activating your transverse abdominis. You are activating those core muscles, or that major core muscle that is the natural weightlifting belt in the body. You're working your TVA. That muscle, when it's stronger, is going to increase the support around the organs in the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity. It is going to provide a nice, strong, secure place for the lumbar spine to reside. It's going to help posteriorly tilt your pelvis and neutralize your hips for proper spinal alignment. So it helps everything balance out. You'll notice when you suck your stomach in, your tailbone almost wants to tuck. So when you squeeze your glutes and you tuck your tailbone, like you're trying to pretend your hips are a bucket of water and you're trying to pour water out the back end. That's a posterior pelvic tilt, and that will neutralize the lower back and help give you more of a natural lordotic curve, especially if you're sitting down a lot at a desk or in a car. So suck it in. Well, I'll usually say suck it up, buttercup. You want to suck your abdominals in, and that's going to activate your transverse abdominis. Now, you're not going to see much from this on the outside. This is a deep muscle. You want to look and you want to see your six-pack. I get it. It's going to come down a lot to a couple things. Resistance training. You cannot spot reduce fat. I will tell everyone, I'll say this until I turn blue in the fucking face. You cannot do crunches and trim body fat. It will never happen. It won't happen. The body doesn't work like that. If you go to a plastic surgeon and they literally suck the fat out and give you lipo, yeah, that'll take fat around from that area. But if you do crunches until you bleed out the eyeballs, you're not going to be burning fat around your stomach. You're going to be working the muscles in that area. Your body does not spot reduce fat. You have to do resistance training overall. You need to strengthen the body overall, and that will increase your resting metabolic rate. It will increase your body's utilization of stored body fat on the daily throughout the entire day. You need to create the habits in your body so it is burning fat throughout the day much more than it normally would with less muscle mass. You need to do resistance training. You need to build your muscles over the entire body. Now, that being said, you want to develop also your six-pack because you want to see it. You do need to work these muscles. And the abdominal muscles are like any other muscle. Everyone's going to have a different combination of type 1 and type 2 fibers, mostly type 1, but the muscles need to be worked like anything else. A mixture of high and low repetitions, a mixture of heavy and lower weight. And it's going to develop everyone differently. Some people are going to have four big blocky abs. Some people are going to have a nice 6 or 10 pack if you really shred it out. Everyone's tendinous and rectus abdominis muscle patterns and insertion patterns are going to be different and look different. That's why you'll see 100 people with 6 packs or 8 packs or 4 packs or whatever it is, and some people look like Ninja Turtles. Some people have, big full abdominal profiles. That's genetic. You can't change that. You got to be happy with what you have. It's going to come down to nutrition, making sure that you're eating the proper foods, you're eating a high, healthy fat diet, low, moderate carbohydrates, stay away mostly from gluten-oriented food, not for allergies, not because gluten's the devil, I'm not getting into that, but just because the foods that don't have gluten are generally better for you. They'll retain less water, they'll cause less inflammation in general. Things like sweet potatoes, white rice, gluten-free oatmeal, things that are quality carbohydrates that won't spike insulin. You want to make sure you're eliminating all the processed foods, fruit juices, sodas, candies, boxed foods, things with preservatives, all that shit, and eating higher fat foods, avocados, grass-fed beef, grass-fed butter, like I do. This is what works for me. It might not work as well for you. It depends. But you want to develop and repair your muscle tissue and give your body the fuel it needs and the bias towards trimming excess body fat. Metabolism has to be increased. The garbage truck can't take these gains. Ain't no garbage there. Yeah, I see you. Hold on a second. I see you. I see you eyeballing the gains. It says on the back, it says goes all in. That garbage truck goes all in. I like it. Goes all in. I wish I could flip the screen around right now. So you are in need of putting the body into a proper environment. Remember I talked about adaptation? Put the body into the proper environment to burn fat. Be a fat burning machine. Higher fat diets will burn more fat. Lower carbohydrate diets will keep your body satisfied with glycogen, your muscles full, and also keep excess body fat storage to a minimum. But it's a habit. It's a habit. It's the day in, day out. It's doing it regularly, and it's not once in a while. Remember, you cannot spot reduce fat. You need to train your body to have core integrity. You need to work your type 1 stabilizers. You need to start incorporating total body movements. Doing overhead exercises, doing heavy resistance training will actually target core muscles. Doing a heavy bench press will fire core musculature. I think what happens in society and what happens with the fitness industry is that everyone thinks that, oh, unless I'm standing one leg on a Bosu ball with a kettlebell over my head while I'm pulling a band and wobbling around, that's working your stabilizers more, and that's not true. You're only working your stabilizers if you are in control. And that is a huge, huge misconception. That might just be tomorrow's episode because that's a whole other topic itself. You are not stabilizing unless you have control of your environment. And just because you're on one leg, just because you're holding a weight in one arm, and just because you're not falling on the ground does not mean that you are stabilizing. It means you're not falling. Stabilization does not mean, look at me, I'm not falling over. No, that's actually being in an unstable environment without control, and you're not training anything. You're actually training your joints to be unstable. So you have to be careful with that. And I might make a note, and that might be tomorrow's episode because that's really fantastic. But when you're doing resistance training, you're firing your core stabilizer muscles. You're firing. Your core is firing. Just because you're on a bench doesn't mean your core isn't working. It's still maintaining and increasing intrathoracic pressure to resist the resistance and to make sure that the organs don't explode and to make sure that the rib cage doesn't collapse. Your body is creating pressure inside the cavities of the body. Overhead movements will trigger more core activation. Doing an overhead squat, if you've seen that in CrossFit, you've seen that in your group exercise classes, or doing any kind of general sitting down on a bench and standing up with a weight overhead, doing a standing overhead press, those all activate core musculature because you're hitting more muscles from the pelvis all the way up to the cervical spine. Exercise like the plank, when done properly, when you do a plank, you squeeze the glutes, you suck in the stomach, you posteriorly tilt the pelvis, and you draw the abdominals in as much as possible to create a nice skinny waist to activate the core intrinsic stabilizers. Doing glute isolation exercise, and I have all these exercises. Check out my YouTube channel, that Swole Train playlist. Check them out because I have the plank, I have the supine hip bridge, I have the single leg squat, I have some very basic core activation exercises. Remember, the core is from the glutes all the way up to the cervical spine, so you want to make sure you're hitting your glutes as well. The rectus abdominis, the six-pack, like any muscle, mix it up, high-low weight, high-low repetitions. You need to train it and give it rest at the same time. I personally like more frequency when it comes to abdominal training. Not once a week and not 7 days a week, but maybe 3 or 4 days a week, depending on the volume, depending on the resistance training. The human body is absolutely amazing, Eddie, on Facebook. Absolutely no question about it. The human body is amazing, and the human body is different for everyone. So I want you to take everything that I'm saying with a couple grains of salt because you're going to apply this in your workout and in your life in your own way. I always say start looking into local yoga classes and your yoga practice. Those of you that are in my premium group, I have an introductory yoga flow, but start implementing these total body movements and these total body stabilization routines because any kind of program, any class, a good, consistent, well-taught yoga class is going to do a couple things. It's going to inhibit all the tight musculature. Literally, yoga came from thousands of years ago, but instead of doing corrective exercise, just start doing yoga. It's going to inhibit and lengthen all the tight musculature. It's going to activate and integrate all the classically underactive muscles, the glutes, the glute maximus, the glute medius, the transverse abdominis. It's going to hit all the rhomboids, the middle and lower trapezius, the posterior rotator cuff. It's going to hit everything. It's going to open up what's tight. It's going to fix your upper cross syndrome. It's going to fix your slouching, your kyphosis. It's going to fix your lordosis. It's going to fix your tight hip flexors. It's going to fix your tight calves. It's going to lengthen and inhibit your adductors. It's going to strengthen your abductors in your hips. It's going to really be fantastic for you and cover all these bases. But to get started, check out my YouTube channel and check out the supine hip bridge. Check out the single leg squat. Check out the, what do I got on there? The supine hip bridge. Those are basic core stabilizers. When you do your abdominal work, make sure you're drawing in your stomach. Practice on drawing in your navel. And you can suck your stomach in when you're at the supermarket, when you're at the bank, when you're in the car. Start practicing the drawing in maneuver. Start working your core intrinsic stabilizers when you're working out, when you're sitting at your desk, when you're in your car. Start thinking about how the core actually works and start putting some more pressure into the core stabilizers and the health and integrity of the base of your core rather than just doing sit-ups for fucking days because they don't work. Limit your range of motion for the rectus abdominis. Focus on the range of motion that those muscles actually have. Protect your lower back, strengthen the base of your pyramid, work the glutes, and keep consistent with it. Thank you so much for joining me for this rare and glorious episode of the Daily Swole, episode 266. Thanks for joining me live every day at 12 noon Eastern Time on Facebook at Swolenormous, watching on YouTube and listening to the podcast on SoundCloud and a motherfucking iTunes. Remember, you can pick up your Swolenormous gear right now at the post pinned on the top of my Facebook page. Got women's racerback tanks, got t-shirts, got pink, got black, got blue, got hoodies, got mugs and stickers, got tons of stuff. And those of you that want some more assistance, you want to learn more about your core stabilizers, want to learn more about core exercise, I'm going to go live on my premium group in just a few moments after this broadcast, and I'm actually going to demonstrate some of these core stabilization exercises. So everyone that is watching live on Facebook, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I love all of you for sharing this broadcast because that's how this shit blows up. Thank you for sharing on this Flex Friday. Make sure everyone catches this episode, if not now, later. You can also tag people in the comments below, and I'll see everyone on Instagram. I'll see you all on Snapchat, and of course, I will see you all tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Time for episode 267 of The Daily Mother Swole, the most muscular podcast in the realm. When I flex, you flex, we all flex our biceps. Peace out. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Lates.